Hi, welcome to another A-Frame Woodworking video lesson. In today's lesson I'm going to show you how to make a square decorative plug in the Greene Greene style. I'm working on a jewelry cabinet made of solid cherry, and I'm going to do my accent pieces in Brazilian cherry. It's a little bit darker, so it should accent those very well. So let's get started and I'll show you how to make a Greene Greene square style plug. The Greene Greene style plug means that it's usually proud of the surface a little bit, and I've done one here. You can really make them more proud, less proud, or you can even cut them flush depending on the style or how you'd like your project to look. For this particular project that we're going to do today, these plugs are about 1/16 of an inch proud of the surface, and I'll show you my trick for keeping them all of uniform height outside of our piece. So the first thing I did on this project that I'm not going to show you in this video is I went ahead and milled my Brazilian cherry. I planed it down to 5/16, checking to see how wide my plugs were, my plug holes in the project, and I went ahead and milled that down. And then I went to the table saw and I ripped these thin strips so that they're 5/16 inch square. And you're going to start using an entire strip of this, and go ahead and make sure you estimate how much you're going to need. There really doesn't take a whole lot of tooling for this. I do have my calipers, and that's just to make sure I find out the proper depth so I know how big to cut them. I have a mallet. I use a rubber mallet on this, and I set up just a little kind of a miter box here with just a strip with a cross cut in there, and then I've also marked this, and you'll see this later on in the video. I just have a small saw to cut the plugs, and I like to go through a couple of different grits before I put them into place. I go from 100 to 150, 220, and then I finish up with a 320. You're also going to need a wood glue. Any type of wood glue will really do for those. It doesn't take a lot to set them into place. And then this isn't mandatory, but what I do is I made a little depth gauge. I call it my little tap block for Greene Greene. And I have different holes drilled at different depths in the bottom. And what I have done here is made them at different depths depending on the style of my project. And this just helps me tap those in place and seat them at the proper depth. So the first thing I do is I come over to my project, and I'm going to check the depth of those holes. And I'll check a couple. And I like to use a calipers for this. And I simply place it inside there and see what my total overall depth is going to be. And then what I need to take into consideration is how far I want these plugs to be proud of the surface. So that's going to determine what you're going to cut those to. I don't like to tap them all the way into the bottom, and I try and do a calculation of figuring out about how much out I want the plug to be, the depth, and then I take that information, and again, this is going to be personal to your project, and then I'm going to transfer that down to my little crosscut assembly that I have down here, and that's where I'll put a mark, and that'll tell me where I want to stop cutting my plugs, because we're not going to cut all the plugs at once because they'll be really small. So we're going to actually start with the entire ripping, and I've made sure that I have a nice square end on the one side, and keep track of that because you don't want to have a crooked piece when you're getting this started. And this is again up to personal style. You can certainly sand these and keep them flat. You can really round them over. For this project, I'm not going to really round over the edges, and all I want to do is soften the edges. And the trick that I use is I kind of hold it like a pencil, and you want to try and keep this even on all the sides. So I'm going to start with 100 grit, and I'm going to go around in a circular motion. And if you start to get too round on one side, you can always come back and just work that side down. After you do a couple dozen of these, you'll really start to get the feel of it. Simply repeat the process. Now moving on to 220. And that looks pretty good. And now we're going to move to our little crosscut station. I have my mark set up there, and I'm just going to line the end of the plug up. Remember to line up your rounded end with your pencil mark. You could even put a stop block there. I don't because it fills up with sawdust. And then I'm just taking a very small saw that I've put a little saw kerf in here. I'm going to go ahead and cut those to size. And there's your plug. Now the thing to keep in mind is which side did you sand round? And then I like to go back real quickly just with the 100 grit sandpaper. This is the side that I just cut, and I'm just going to put 2 or 3 strokes on each of these. It just gives it a little bit of a taper, and it'll go into your mortise just a little bit easier. I already have one of those plugs in place. I'm ready to do this one. I got a couple of plugs to do on this base and then a couple dozen to do on the entire project. So I want to make sure that I have my tapered end, and here's my slightly rounded over top. And I'm going to go ahead, and I like the Titebond glue. I'm going to go ahead and just put a little bit inside the mortise and either use a brush. I like to use the back end of just one of my tiny little paint brushes. Again, make sure you're looking for your tapered side and your rounded over side. Go ahead and position that. The taper just helps it seat easily. And I try and start them off as square as I can. And then this is my tap block. Tap block for Greene Greene plugs. And I'm going to make sure that I use this one. This is the 1/16 inch deep hole. Again, you can make a whole bunch of these at different sizes. And then I'm just going to place the plug inside of that hole and take my rubber mallet and just slightly tap it. And when my tap block is flush, so is my plug. And that'll help to keep these all of uniform depth the whole way around. And they really do a nice job of accenting and covering up those holes where you put the screws. And that's it. Doing the plugs is a pretty simple operation. Go ahead and give these a try. Sand them through your grits first, check your depth, and you should have a lot of success with this. I like the Greene Greene plugs. I use those in a lot of my projects. So if you have any questions about this or any of the other videos or any projects I've done, feel free to email me. You can find our contact information at www.aframewoodworking.com. Let me know how you do. Send me pictures of any projects you're working on where you've used this. And good luck. Try some Greene Greene plugs.